This is also a time of change for my family.
The monarchy had survived abdications, betrayals, family exile, and national mourning. But nothing had prepared Britain for the declaration delivered by Prince William behind the sealed doors of Buckingham Palace. With King Charles weakened, the succession under pressure, and senior royals divided, William stepped forward and gave his eldest son a title no modern heir had carried. Prince George was now the Crown Prince of Britain, and the royal family would never be the same again. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The summons came without warning. Catherine entered beside William, while Princess Anne and Queen Camilla were escorted into the chamber separately. Buckingham Palace was not gathering the family for ceremony. It was gathering them because the future of the crown, the line through which the monarchy passes from one sovereign to the next, had become unstable. William did not soften the announcement. He placed his pen beside the emergency declaration, a royal order activated during institutional danger, and looked directly at George. Then he said it plainly. His eldest son was being named Crown Prince of Britain, the declared and protected future beyond his own succession. The prince added that the boy would no longer be treated as a child waiting silently in line. From that moment, he would be prepared under strict protection. George did not smile. He gripped the chair and searched Catherine's face for reassurance. The princess answered with a small nod, but pride and fear fought beneath her expression. She understood why William had acted. She also understood what the title could take from their son before he was old enough to resist it. Charles read the wording twice. The king set the document down without speaking, aware that his heir had protected the dynasty while shifting control away from the reigning monarch. Camilla noticed something worse. Her name appeared nowhere among the formal witnesses, meaning those recorded as supporting the order. The queen consort understood that the declaration was not only raising George, it was limiting who could shape the next reign. Anne broke the silence through a documented council statement placed before Charles. She confirmed that the order relied on a dormant emergency clause, a safeguard reserved for moments when royal continuity was judged at risk. William had not invented the power that day. He had prepared to use it. As the chamber emptied, Charles ordered his son to remain. The doors closed, leaving father and heir alone with the proclamation between them. George had received the title, but the House of Windsor had reopened every private wound it had tried to bury. To the public, Prince George had just become the most protected young royal in Britain. To his family, he remained an 11-year-old boy, being asked to understand a future that even grown monarchs had struggled to carry. William saw duty. Catherine saw danger. Charles saw history repeating itself. And George, surrounded by titles, advisors, and expectations, was left confronting the most frightening truth of all. His life might no longer belong entirely to him. William had never viewed the declaration as an act of ambition. He saw it as a shield. His own childhood had unfolded beneath relentless public attention, bitter parental conflict, and the devastating loss of Diana. The prince knew how quickly royal uncertainty could become emotional damage, and he refused to let George enter that same storm without protection. Catherine understood his fear, but she feared something else. The princess supported securing their son's future. Yet the title had arrived before the boy possessed the emotional strength to grasp its full meaning. Crown Prince of Britain was more than a name. It marked him as the monarchy's formally protected future, placing his preparation under rules normally controlled by senior royal offices. She cared less about those offices than about preserving the child beneath the title. Later that evening, Catherine found George alone, with the ceremonial folder resting in front of him. He did not ask about ceremonies or privilege. He asked whether he now had to behave differently around Charlotte and Louis. She sat beside him and promised that no declaration could remove his place inside their family. George listened, but he did not look convinced. William entered moments later and immediately sensed the distance. George turned toward him and asked whether the announcement meant something had happened to the king. The future king paused before answering. That silence lasted only seconds, but it exposed the fear the adults had hidden from the children. His son understood that the title had not emerged from confidence alone. It had emerged from danger. Charles felt that danger differently. Alone with Princess Anne, the king admitted during a recorded private conversation that George's elevation made his own reign feel suddenly fragile. The monarch believed the palace was preparing for a future in which his influence could weaken faster than anyone had publicly acknowledged. Camilla demanded answers. The queen consort wanted to know whether George would now receive constitutional briefings, meaning private lessons about how the crown works with government, or gain access to protected residences and ceremonial powers once controlled by the sovereign's household. Her questions revealed that she understood the declaration's true reach. Anne answered through a documented council briefing. She warned that George's preparation now belonged to a protected council led by William and Catherine. Camilla would not control its members, money, or schedule. Then Charles found the date on the original draft. It had been prepared weeks before the emergency meeting. The decision had been waiting in silence, and the king now intended to discover which palace incident had made William finally use it. The emergency declaration did not begin with a constitutional debate or a private warning from the king. It began during a royal banquet, beneath polite conversation and carefully controlled smiles. One unexpected instruction placed Prince George at the center of a struggle he did not yet understand. By the end of that evening, William had reached a decision he had resisted for months. The title announced at Buckingham Palace was not a symbol of confidence. It was the answer to a threat. Tension had been building for weeks. William believed George's schedule, security briefings, and public duties belonged first to his parents. The sovereign's household saw those same decisions as crown business, meaning matters controlled in the name of the reigning monarch. Every new instruction pushed the boy further into a system his mother and father could no longer fully supervise. Anne had already noticed the pattern. Through a documented private briefing, the princess showed William that George's ceremonial education was being expanded without Catherine's approval. She helped him prepare a protective succession framework, a formal plan designed to secure the young prince's future role, while keeping control with his parents. The draft remained hidden because neither of them wanted to trigger a family war. Then came the Commonwealth Unity Banquet. The ceremony was meant to honor nations linked through the Commonwealth. But one order changed everything. Camilla's senior private secretary instructed George to leave his parents' table and sit beside foreign dignitaries as the future face of continuity. William had not approved it. Catherine had not even been warned. George froze as an attendant reached for his chair. William placed one hand against its back and calmly said it would remain exactly where it was. The room fell silent. The prince asked who had authorized the change, but no one answered quickly enough. That hesitation told him more than any explanation could. Catherine saw panic cross her son's face. She took his hand beneath the table and held it tightly, while senior courtiers argued over him as though he were already an institution instead of a child. The princess felt fear turn into anger. Palace politics had entered a family moment, and George was paying the price. Camilla defended the decision. The queen consort insisted the seating change was meant to prepare the boy for future responsibility. William answered that his son would not be prepared through secret orders issued behind his parents' backs. George heard every word, while she realized the confrontation had become personal. After the banquet, Anne handed William a sealed schedule. It listed 3 more engagements arranged without parental consent, including a private succession briefing from which Catherine had been excluded. That was the point of no return. William called Anne that night and gave one direct order: activate the emergency framework. When Charles learned what had happened, he did not cancel the schedule. The king summoned his son instead. The banquet had ended with restrained smiles, but the confrontation it created would now bring a future king face to face with the reigning monarch. There were no advisors in the room when Prince William confronted his father. No private secretaries, no carefully prepared statements. Only a reigning king, the man destined to follow him, and the signed declaration that had placed a child between their competing visions of duty. Charles believed the crown must shape its heirs. William believed the crown had already taken too much from his family. What followed was not merely an argument over a title. It was a reckoning between generations. Charles believed the monarchy could not survive if every royal household acted alone. The king saw George's training as part of sovereign authority, meaning the reigning monarch's power to direct the work and future of the crown. Without one system, he feared competing courts, divided loyalties, and a dynasty weakened from within. William saw that same system as the danger. The prince argued that palace tradition had repeatedly sacrificed emotional stability for institutional convenience. He would not allow George to become a ceremonial asset, controlled by courtiers, before the boy understood who he was beyond duty. Charles pushed the declaration across the table. He asked whether his son had ever intended to seek permission. William did not sit. He answered that he had secured legal authority, Catherine's agreement, and Anne's constitutional support. He had not asked permission to protect his own child. The king's restraint broke. He accused William of using George to announce the beginning of a new court before the current reign had ended. The future king's answer came without hesitation. "He is not the beginning of my court. He is my son." Charles stared back, because the words struck deeper than any constitutional challenge. Diana's shadow entered the argument without warning. Charles warned that protection could become isolation, trapping George inside fear rather than preparing him for responsibility. William replied that he had already seen what palace protection meant when his mother was left exposed, dismissed, and consumed by the machinery now reaching for his son. The king heard the accusation. He also heard the grief beneath it. Then Charles revealed the weakness in the declaration. Through a recorded account of the meeting, he stated that he had never formally approved the wording, "Crown Prince of Britain." His silence during the gathering had not been consent. The title could still be challenged. William answered with the instrument Charles had forgotten. The Regency Continuity Instrument was a legal safeguard allowing royal authority to continue during illness or incapacity. The king had signed it during a confidential health review, and Anne had used that authority to validate the declaration. Charles walked toward the door, then stopped. Without turning, he asked whether George truly understood what had been done in his name. William's anger faded. He could not answer with certainty. Outside, Camilla was waiting. The Queen Consort had learned that the new succession council would reduce her influence, and she was already preparing to fight back. The title belonged to George, but the battle surrounding it was being fought by adults who understood exactly how power moved through palace corridors. Queen Camilla saw an emergency declaration that weakened the sovereign's household. Princess Anne saw a barrier protecting the next generation. Between them stood Charles, torn between his wife's warnings and his sister's unforgiving loyalty to the crown. Then Anne revealed that one final signature had made the decision nearly impossible to reverse. Camilla felt the loss immediately. The declaration had transferred control of George's preparation to a protected family council, a small body responsible for his education, ceremonial training, future household, and private succession briefings. The Queen Consort had been removed from every one of those decisions. Her influence had not been reduced quietly. It had been cut away. The silence inside her office made the humiliation worse. Camilla found the old succession schedules gone from her desk, along with the briefing files she had once reviewed beside Charles. She sat without calling an aide. The missing papers mattered, but the message behind them mattered more. William no longer trusted her near the future of the dynasty. Charles heard the anger when she returned. The Queen told him that his son had humiliated them both by acting as though the reign were already ending. The King defended William's fear, insisting that George had been pulled into palace decisions without his parents' consent. Yet he could not deny the deeper truth. His own authority had weakened the moment the declaration took effect. Anne refused to soften her position. As senior guardian, meaning the person charged with protecting the order from interference, the princess held responsibility for ensuring that no competing household could reshape George's role through private instructions. Camilla asked during a recorded council session whether she had helped design the title simply to push her aside. Anne answered that she had acted because the boy needed protection from anyone who confused access with authority. Then Anne opened the continuity register. The documented record showed that Charles had signed the enabling instrument during an earlier medical emergency. Because the power had been granted before the current dispute, the monarch could not withdraw it without exposing the health concerns that had created it. The king understood the trap immediately. Catherine's signature made the position stronger. Through a written parental consent attached to the register, the princess confirmed that she had approved activation only after the Commonwealth banquet. William had not acted alone. George's mother and father had made the decision together. Charles lifted his pen as though ready to suspend the council. Then he placed it down. Reversing the title would drag George into an even uglier battle, and the king could not accept that cost. Before anyone spoke again, an aide entered with urgent news. The declaration had leaked. Britain was about to hear the words "Crown Prince" for the first time, and the palace had already lost control of the story. The first casualty of the leaked declaration was not a senior royal's authority. It was the fragile privacy surrounding 3 children. Before William and Catherine could explain the announcement properly, George's new title was flashing across broadcasts, phones, and newspaper alerts. Charlotte heard it from a classmate. Louis saw strangers waiting outside the gates. And George discovered that the words spoken inside Buckingham Palace had transformed the way the world looked at him before he had decided how to look at himself. The palace confirmed the title within hours. George's security classification was raised, his public schedule was frozen, and every planned family engagement was placed under the new succession protocol, a set of rules controlling the safety and duties of those closest to the throne. William and Catherine returned to Windsor early, knowing that one leaked document had turned their home into the center of a national storm. Staff moved quickly, but the damage had already entered the family. Briefing folders disappeared from shared rooms, television alerts were silenced, and the harshest headlines were kept away from the children. Yet no royal household could control every phone, every classmate, or every whisper beyond the gates. George entered the kitchen holding a screen with his new title across it. He placed the device on the table and asked why millions of people had been told before he had been given time to understand. William tried to explain that the declaration had been created to protect him. The boy answered with painful calm. Protection should not feel like strangers suddenly knew more about his future than he did. Catherine found Charlotte shaken by a different fear. The young princess asked whether George would now be separated from her and Louis. Her mother promised that no title could change who he was inside the family. But the princess felt the words catch in her throat, because she feared that duty might slowly create the very distance her daughter dreaded. Charles watched the confirmation broadcast and understood the damage at once. The king called Windsor immediately. When George answered, the monarch did not speak about service, history, or obligation. He apologized that the boy had learned how heavy the crown could feel before anyone had taught him how to carry it. George listened silently, while his grandfather realized that the institution had repeated an old mistake. Anne uncovered something darker through a documented security review. The leaked copy had circulated inside the sovereign's household before the emergency gathering. Someone had tried to expose the declaration before William could control its announcement. Camilla was offered the suspected name during a private briefing. The queen consort refused to use it against the prince. Seeing the children suffer had changed the battle. She understood that one more act of retaliation would wound George more than William. That evening, George asked to speak with his father alone, not as crown prince, not as an heir, as a son who needed the truth. The turning point did not occur inside a council chamber. It came late at night, with no courtiers, no lawyers, and no royal protocol separating a father from his son. George had listened to adults describe his duty, his protection, and his destiny. Now he wanted to speak for himself. What he told William forced the future king to confront a painful possibility. In trying to save his child from the monarchy, he may have made the monarchy impossible for him to escape. George asked for one thing before the conversation began: no advisors, no prepared notes, and no one telling him what he was expected to feel. Catherine understood immediately. The princess stayed close, but she left father and son alone because the boy needed space to speak without being protected from his own truth. William entered, believing the title might be rejected completely. The prince was prepared to suspend its public use, even if that decision triggered another battle with Charles and the palace. Crown Prince of Britain had become more than a title. It was now a formal role identifying George as the protected future of the monarchy, and that role could shape every part of his life. George asked his father to sit beside him, not across from him. The small request changed the balance between them. Then he said he did not want strangers deciding his life, but he did not want fear deciding it either. William heard maturity in those words, but he also heard the pain that had forced it to arrive too early. The question came next. George asked why the declaration had been signed before anyone spoke honestly to him. William did not hide behind duty. He admitted that he had been afraid the palace would gain control first. That fear pushed him to act quickly, but it also stopped him from seeing how powerless his son might feel. William apologized without defending himself. The future king told George that he had confused parental protection with complete parental authority. He promised that the title would never be used to silence him, separate him from Charlotte and Louis, or turn his childhood into a program controlled by others. George gave his answer carefully. He would accept the role, but only if his preparation continued around school, siblings, family life, and personal choice. He rejected a separate court, meaning an independent royal household built around him, and he refused any treatment that placed him above his brother and sister inside the family. William removed the official title folder from the table and replaced it with a blank notebook. The prince told his son that the rules of his future would be written with him, not merely for him. Catherine saw the change when they emerged. She embraced George, not because he had accepted a crown, but because he had found the courage to place limits around it. The title would survive. Now William had to face Charles, Camilla, and the nation, and prove that George's voice mattered more than palace tradition. By sunrise, the declaration belonged to the world. Broadcasters abandoned their schedules. Newspapers rebuilt their front pages. Crowds gathered outside royal gates, divided between celebration and concern for a boy suddenly placed at the center of history. Yet one image changed the national mood more powerfully than any constitutional explanation. It showed George walking beside Charlotte and Louis, not ahead of them, while William remained one step behind. In that moment, Britain saw both the future crown and the family determined to protect it. British broadcasters called the decision the greatest change to royal succession preparation in generations. Succession preparation meant the private training, security, education, and duties arranged for those expected to inherit the throne. Some commentators praised William for modernizing the monarchy. Others warned that he had begun transferring authority away from Charles before the king's reign was finished. Buckingham Palace answered with a carefully controlled statement. It confirmed that George's title honored continuity, but did not change the constitutional line of succession, the legal order deciding who inherits the crown. Kensington Palace focused on something more personal. The young prince would remain in school, stay close to Charlotte and Louis, and continue living as part of the family, rather than entering a separate royal household. The Chronicle Standard captured the nation's unease. Its special morning edition carried George beneath the headline, "The Boy Who Now Carries Britain's Tomorrow." The caption spoke not of privilege, but of the solemn uncertainty on his face. That single front page turned a palace power struggle into the story of a child facing history too soon. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace before midday. Some raised Union flags and celebrated William's decision. Others left handwritten cards asking the family to protect George's childhood. One child placed a message among the flowers: "You can be brave and still be young." The words spread across broadcasts because they expressed what official statements could not. Public division deepened. Supporters argued that the prince had secured the monarchy before another crisis could strike. Critics answered that no child should receive such a burden through an emergency act. Britain was repeating the same argument that had already torn through the royal family. Was the declaration protection, or pressure disguised as duty? Charles watched the crowd coverage beside Camilla. The king finally admitted that the public was not celebrating the weakening of his reign. It was asking whether the crown could learn from the pain of its past. The queen consort heard him, then approved a public statement supporting George and recognizing William and Catherine's primary authority over his upbringing. George gave the nation its clearest answer at Windsor. He walked between Charlotte and Louis, not ahead of them. When cameras called his new title, he turned toward his siblings before facing the crowd. Britain had accepted that history had changed. Now Charles had to decide whether he would resist that change or give it his blessing. The crisis ended where it had begun, inside Buckingham Palace, with the declaration resting between 3 generations. Charles had every reason to resent it. William had every reason to defend it. George had every reason to fear it. Yet the final decision would not be determined by pride, protocol, or hidden palace power. It would be decided by whether a family shaped by duty could finally place humanity at the center of the crown. When the king rose to speak, no one interrupted him. Charles had summoned William, Catherine, George, Camilla, and Anne for one final family council. This was not a constitutional hearing filled with competing aides. It was a private meeting meant to settle the conflict before it damaged the monarchy beyond repair. Every person in that room understood why the moment mattered. George's future was at stake, and so was the family's ability to remain united. William spoke first. The prince explained that his son would accept the title only under strict protection for his education, privacy, family life, and right to help shape his own future. Crown Prince of Britain would mean a protected position of preparation and continuity, not independent royal power. George listened while his father made clear that duty would no longer erase childhood. Charles crossed the room and sat beside his grandson. The king told George that the crown could ask for service, courage, and sacrifice, but it must never destroy the person expected to serve it. The boy looked toward William, and the future king understood that his father was no longer fighting the declaration. He was trying to make peace with it. Charles then admitted that his son had acted from fear. The monarch also acknowledged that the family's history had earned that fear. William answered with equal honesty. He recognized that the declaration had made his father feel as though his reign had already been judged and replaced. For the first time, neither man tried to win. Camilla turned to Catherine next. The queen consort promised that she would not challenge the protected council. The princess accepted the assurance without triumph, knowing that lasting peace required dignity, not humiliation. Anne remained silent until both women had finished, then confirmed through the written council record that the agreement would be binding. Charles signed the royal confirmation, a formal order giving final recognition to George's title. The king defined the role as preparation, protection, and national continuity. He then offered the pen to his grandson. George closed the case and handed it to William, showing that his father would carry the burden beside him. Anne remained guardian of the succession framework. William and Catherine kept full parental authority. Camilla withdrew from George's preparation council, and every unauthorized schedule was cancelled. The declaration had not crowned George early or ended Charles's reign. It had forced the monarchy to accept one final truth. Preparing an heir must never mean sacrificing a child. The emergency declaration began as a struggle over control, but it ended as a promise that this time the crown would be carried by a family standing together, not by a child standing alone. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.